Look, I said, before you do anything silly. I started to move towards her, but the way she spun round made me realize that staying still was probably the better plan. I didn't want to be pulling bits of telephone receiver out of my face for the next few weeks. "You stay right there, Mr. James Fincham," she hissed at me. "There's nothing silly about this. I'm calling an ambulance and I'm calling the police. This is an internationally approved procedure. Men come round with big sticks and take you away. Nothing silly about it at all." "Look," I said, "I haven't been entirely straight with you." She turned towards me and narrowed her eyes, if you know what I mean by that. Narrowed them horizontally, not vertically. I suppose one should say she shortened her eyes. But nobody ever does. She narrowed her eyes. "What the hell do you mean, not entirely? You only told me two things. You mean one of them was a lie?" She had me on the ropes. There's no question about that. I was in trouble, but then again, she only dialed the first 9. "My name is James Fincham," I said, "and I do know your father." "Yeah? What brand of cigarette does he smoke?" "Dunno. Never smoked a cigarette in his life." She was late 20s, possibly 30 at a pinch. I took a deep breath while she dialed the second 9. "All right, I don't know him, but I am trying to help." "Right, you've come to fix the shower. Third 9, play the big card." "Someone is trying to kill him," I said. There was a faint click, and I could hear somebody somewhere asking which service we wanted. Very slowly she turned towards me, holding the receiver away from her face. "What did you say?" "Someone is trying to kill your father," I repeated. "I don't know who, and I don't know why, but I'm trying to stop them. That's who I am, and that's what I'm doing here." She looked at me long and hard. A clock ticked somewhere, hideously. "This man," I pointed at Rayner, "had something to do with it." I could see that she thought this unfair, as Rayner was hardly in a position to contradict me, so I softened my tone a little, looking around anxiously as if I was every bit as mystified and fretted up as she was. "I can't say he came here to kill," I said, "because we didn't get a chance to talk much, but it's not impossible." She carried on staring at me. The operator was squeaking hellos down the line, and probably trying to trace the call. She waited. "For what? I'm not sure." "Ambulance," she said at last, still looking at me, and then turned away slightly and gave the address. She nodded, and then slowly, very slowly, put the receiver back on its cradle and turned to me. There was one of those pauses that you know is going to be as long as soon as it starts, so I shook out another cigarette and offered her the packet. She came towards me and stopped. She was shorter than she'd looked on the other side of the room. I smiled again, and she took a cigarette from the packet, but didn't light it. She just played with it slowly, and then pointed a pair of grey eyes at me. I say a pair, I mean her pair. She didn't get a pair of someone else's eyes out from a drawer and point them at me. She pointed her own pair of huge, pale, huge eyes at me. The sort of eyes that can make a grown man talk gibberish to himself. "Get a grip, for Christ's sake." "You're a liar," she said. Not angry, not scared, just matter of fact. "You're a liar." "Well, yes," I said. "Generally speaking, I am. But at this particular moment I happen to be telling the truth." She kept on staring at my face the way I sometimes do when I've finished shaving, but she didn't seem to get any more answers than I ever have. Then she blinked once, and the blink seemed to change things somehow. Something had been released or switched off, or at least turned down a bit. I started to relax. Why would anyone want to kill my father? Her voice was softer now. "I honestly don't know," I said. "I've only just found out he doesn't smoke." She pressed straight on as if she hadn't heard me. "And tell me, Mr. Fincham," she said, "how you came by all this?" This was the tricky bit, the really tricky bit. Trickiness cubed. "Because I was offered the job," I said. She stopped breathing. I mean, she actually stopped breathing. and didn't look as if she had any plans to start again in the near future. I carried on as calmly as I could. "Someone offered me a lot of money to kill your father," I said, and she frowned in disbelief. I turned it down. I shouldn't have added that. I really shouldn't have. Newton's third law of conversation, if it existed, would hold that every statement implies an equal and opposite statement. To say that I had turned an offer down raised the possibility that I might not have done, which was not a thing I wanted floating around the room at this moment. But she started breathing again, so maybe she hadn't noticed. Why? Why what? Her left eye had a tiny streak of green that went off from the pupil in the northeasterly direction. I stood there, looking in her eyes, and trying not to, because I was in terrible trouble at this moment, in a lot of ways. "Why do you turn it down?" "Because," I began, then stopped. "Because I had to get this absolutely right." "Yes?" "Because I don't kill people." There was a pause while she took this in and swilled it round her mouth a few times. Then she glanced over at Rayner's body. "I told you," I said. "He started it." She stared into me for another 300 years, and then, still turning the cigarette slowly between her fingers, moved away towards the sofa, apparently deep in thought. "Honestly," I said, trying to get hold of myself and the situation, "I'm nice. I give to Oxfam. I recycle newspapers. Everything." She reached Rayner's body and stopped. "So when did all this happen?" "Well, just now," I stammered, like an idiot. She closed her eyes for a moment. "I mean, you getting asked." "Right," I said. 10 days ago." "Where?" "Amsterdam." "Holland, right?" That was a relief. That made me feel a lot better. It's nice to be looked up to by the young every now and then. You don't want it all the time, just every now and then. "Right," I said. "And who was it that offered you this job? Never seen him before, or since?" She stopped for the glass, took a sip of the Calvados, and grimaced at the taste of it. "And I'm supposed to believe this?" "Well, I mean, help me out here," she said. Starting to get louder again, she nodded towards Rayner. "We have a guy here who isn't going to back up your story. I wouldn't say. And I'm supposed to believe you because of what? Because you have a nice face?" I couldn't help myself. I should have helped myself, I know, but I just couldn't. "Why not?" I said, and tried to look charming. "I'd believe anything you said." "Terrible. Really terrible. One of the crassest, most ridiculous remarks I've ever made, in a long, ridiculous remark-packed life." She turned to me, suddenly very angry. "You can drop that shit right now." "All I meant," I said, but I was glad that she cut me off, because I honestly didn't know what I meant. "I said drop it. There is a guy dying in here." I nodded guiltily, and we both bowed our heads at Rayner, as if paying our respects, and then she seemed to snap the hymn book shut and move on. Her shoulders relaxed, and she held out a glass to me. "I'm Sarah," she said. "See if you can get me a Coke."